Looking back on it now, it was the beginning of my healing journey when I called off my wedding, but there was no healing going on before that. I was deeply struggling and drowning in substance abuse. I was getting high without her knowledge, to the point where I think my soul knew I needed to get out of it. I knew I needed to confront myself, and so I orchestrated my demise. I cheated on her, wouldn't allow myself to tell her.
And what that shifted for you when you stepped away and chose yourself and finally took the red pill.
So I went to my mom, and I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm gonna quit. And she's like, are you stupid? You have 401k, health care, you work for one of the best companies in the world, you have a 6-figure salary, like, are you crazy? And I was like, well, I'm either gonna kill myself or I'm gonna quit. You can pick.
Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Embracing Human podcast.
Before we begin the next episode, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for your support in helping us grow our podcast.
Take a moment to like, subscribe, or follow on whatever platform you're watching this on.
Your engagement helps us to grow our platform as well as allows us to invite even more interesting interviews in the future. I hope you enjoy the following episode and wish that you gain insight, clarity, or knowledge about what it means for you to embrace being human.
Welcome to a special, what we'll call, episode of our Embracing Human podcast. So today I'll be interviewing my co-host, my brother, partner in crime, learned to navigate the world. This gentleman is very special to me. And as we unpack this journey that we've shared together, you'll get some insight and depth to how this magic has come about. And this person I'm interviewing is none other than Mr. Scott Stone. And again, I know him as my brother, my roommate, friend, sometimes my coach, my supporter. And today we're going to learn about a little bit about who he is and how he got to this magical island of Maui and his journey overall. So would you like to share, Mr. Scott Stone, a little bit about yourself, from your heart, from your words, from your truth?
Yeah, what an interesting exploration of the self. Who am I? And I think in the past I would have introduced myself as whether my occupation, like, this is what I do in the world, and that might have been a manager or a vice president or a CEO. And then over time, I would say maybe it's more of who I am. And, then it would be a son, a brother, an uncle, a partner. And as you were sharing that, I thought back to, like, well, what do I want to be known for? And it was like love, freedom, possibility, permission, sweetness, gentleness. That's an interesting question. Oftentimes when we meet someone, like, so what do you do? Because it sounds kind of weird to be like, so who are you? It just sounds confronting.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I've thought about lately is when I meet people, I'm like, so what do you do for fun? I don't know if there's an introduction I want to give, and maybe I'll let the stories speak for themselves and let people make their own opinions and judgments and identities of who I am for them.
That's fair. Well, to challenge you a little bit, in one or two sentences, who are you to you?
I guess what's there is I'm a space of curious permission for the exploration of what I'm experiencing. Who am I for myself? God, that has changed so much over the years. I feel like who I've been for myself is my biggest critic. And who I am and becoming for myself is my biggest fan. Is seeing myself as others see me, seeing myself as those I love receive me, and seeing myself through the eyes of my dog. And that's just a really, really loving human. I think that's, more than anything these days, what I want to be known and seen and remembered for is like this guy who laughed and smiled and gave each other permission and reminder to do the same.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for challenging me.
That's what we're here for. Well, let's go on a little journey then of this magical journey of life through your eyes and what you've experienced. And all roads lead to this present moment, sitting across from each other in Maui, and we both know that we've each have lived what feels like multiple lives, many different chapters, and many different variations of self. And it's a process, and the process is life. And I'd love to start digging into this beautiful process of exploring your life. And as we discuss many times on this podcast, or even just our own conversation, relationships is a big part of this journey. And yes, it always comes back to this self-exploration with the relationship with yourself. But the impactful mirror that relationships from the outside present to us are pretty profound. And I'd love to explore a profound chapter of your life in context of relationships, which many of us can relate to. And this is more along the context of marriage. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'd love to learn, to hear through your genuine, authentic expression of what it was like at one point in your life to be engaged and to reach that critical and crucial moment of calling off your wedding.
I think about this not often as like a rumination, but like what a relatable experience to have. Where I see a lot of relationships that what appears is like people don't want to be in them, but they don't know how to get out of them. And I guess in a way that would sum up that relationship. I was engaged to be married, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. And more so than the right thing to do, it was what looked right. I used to call my fiance not to her face by any means, but I described her as my purse. Like it was this like little handbag that I had that made me look cool. Mm-hmm. She was beautiful. She made a lot of money like I did. And, it was in a way like the American dream. And we together at, 24 years old, we're making $250,000, which is a lot of money for some 24-year-olds to make. Mm-hmm. And we could do whatever we wanted. But it reminds me of this quote that I think I lived my life by, which was thousands and thousands of people live their lives in screaming desperation, working long, hard hours at jobs they hate to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. Mm. And that was my life. I didn't know how to sit still. I didn't know what sobriety meant, whether that was smoking, drinking, or shopping. Pick a day, and I had a poison. And I think she could tell that I was very unsettled, but just let me be me. And yet I had a huge problem with that. I didn't like who I was. And like I said earlier, I was a very big critic for myself. And so, we dated long distance from out of college, and we ended up working for competitors, and she quit her job, moved across the country, and moved in with me in Iowa. Actually, she got her own place because her parents were very religious, and we couldn't have a place together until we were getting married. It was just this one-way run, like this runaway train that I never could get off of. And I struggled in silence. I think looking back on it now, it was the beginning of my healing journey when I called off my wedding, but there was no healing going on before that. I was deeply struggling and drowning in substance abuse. I was getting high without her knowledge. I was drinking excessive amounts of alcohol when I would drink. And caveat for me, excessive amounts is 2 or 3 drinks because I'm allergic to alcohol, and so I would just get hammered drunk. But, it was misery. To the point where I think my soul knew I needed to get out of it. I knew I needed to confront myself, and so I orchestrated my demise. I cheated on her and wouldn't allow myself to tell her. I knew that once I did that, I could never live with myself, and so I just torpedoed our engagement. I just stopped caring. And it was very clear to me afterwards that I was just waiting for her to have more courage than I did. And I'll never forget, I was working a project at work, and I came home on like a Saturday morning to working through the night or something just really messed up. I came home and she was staying in the living room and she looked at me and she says, I don't think we should get married. And at this point I was so resigned. I was like, okay, great. I agree. And it was in her vulnerability that invited in my own vulnerability that allowed me to own who I was being in that relationship. And I sat down on the couch and I told her, I was like, I've been lying to you. I go home and I smoke weed with my friends. I get super drunk. I've been living two lives. And then I even told her about this trip I had with some friends, some guys' weekend in Chicago, and all these guys were doing coke, and I tried coke, and she was so flabbergasted. She slept in the guest room that night, moved out the next day. And at the time, I didn't have the courage and the bravery to admit about the infidelity, which I did do maybe a couple years later. That next week when she moved out and I was confronted with this silence, this deafening silence of my house and how loud my thoughts got, I had never encountered the level of hell that came in the solitary confinement, my demise. And that was where my healing journey started unknowingly. I think at the beginning it was mostly in this realization of suicidal ideation that I was like, I need to do something or I will not continue to be here. So I started therapy, which didn't really work. I danced around that therapist. Like it almost showed me that I could manipulate my environment. But really the thing that saved my life was probably two things. One, the most obvious was Chester coming into my life, my dog, because it gave me a reason to get out of bed. I had to get up in the morning to take him outside. And I realized that when I walked him, because he was such a beautiful dog, that people would notice me. And so it gave me this like sense of meaning, which in a way sounded kind of vain at the time, but it was important, I think. And the second one was my community. I remember I had a couple friends who would come over to my house, and they would quite literally force me out of my house. They would be like, we're going out. And I was like, I don't want to go out. And they're like, we don't care. And I was like, damn. And that was enough to keep me going, you know. And then I kind of lost myself in work a little bit, but I also realized at the time, I was like, wow, I asked for this. I created this. I gave myself an idea and I fulfilled upon it. And at that point I was like, wow, what if I aimed for what I wanted, not what I didn't want? And that was really, really eye-opening to see that the mind will go after whatever story it creates. And I think that's why I do what I do now, because a lot of people are like, I can't avoid this runaway train. I'm like, don't go towards it, you know, meet your fears. It was an extremely confronting time, and yet I think it was one of my biggest gifts. It was my awakening to like really see that I was playing small. I was scared. And, you know, 10 years now on that healing journey, I think it really drives me to help other people get off of their own suffering and to create a life they want versus one they want to avoid. I think Tony Robbins has a quote like, as human organisms, we will forever go after avoiding pain than seeking pleasure. You know, pleasure would have been calling off my wedding on my own volition, yet it occurred as deep pain. I think there's something in that for a lot of us to see, where do we not believe we're worthy of that pleasure? You know, like, what do I do with that? You're like, do whatever you want with it. You know, it's like, am I worthy of that? Like, only if you believe you are.
Thank you for sharing. Speaking of worth and speaking of value, society tends to define that through the career or work you choose to do in adulthood. As we've gotten older, we've questioned, what does value really mean? And I'd love to hear this self-exploration of deconstructing value and worth when it came to your career working in corporate, and what that shifted for you when you stepped away and chose yourself and finally took the red pill. What did that open up for you?
When I started college, I was pre-med, and the joke is if your parents are Asian, you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. And you know, so I started pre-med to be a doctor. My brother was in medical school, and one of the best gifts he's ever given me was he looked at me and he said, hey, if you don't love this, don't do it. He's like, you are going to spend hours every day doing. He studied for like 14 hours a day. He was like, I'd be studying like x-rays in my head in the shower. He's like, if you don't love this, don't do it. And I didn't love it. I was doing it for a paycheck. And I was like, all right, fuck it. But I didn't know what I wanted. So I went to my advisor and I was like, well, what's the next best thing that will give me job security, that could keep me on this track in case I change my mind? And they were like, chemical engineering. And I was like, cool, sign me up. Little did I know it was the hardest major in the whole college. like incredibly 40-page homework assignments in multiple classes a week. Like it was insane. I get Facebook memories still to this day. I saw one that was like October 6th, 2008. This week is going to be this Friday is going to be one of the worst days of my life. And I guarantee it was regarding an exam I was taking. There's so many statuses I get that are like, pulling an overnighter in the engineering building. Come help me not kill myself. Like just horrible amounts of suffering. And I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no other idea what I wanted. And so I still was going after this idea of money. And I remember I was at P&G. This was 2014 now. I called off my wedding in 2014. So it would have been 2015. My friend came to me. I was so tired of work. I was working crazy 60, 80 hours a week and just no idea what to do and just suffering and struggling. And my friend from high school came to me and was like, hey, do you want to start a company with me? And I was like, no, I make a lot of money. And, maybe 6-8 weeks later, I was just so tired of it and I was so over it. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to quit my job. So I went to my mom and I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to quit P&G. And she's like, are you fucking stupid? She's like, you have 401k, health care. You work for one of the best companies in the world. You have a 6-figure salary. Like, are you crazy? And I was like, well, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to quit. You can pick. She was like, okay, quit. She's like, okay, you can leave your job. And it's interesting looking back on that of like, oh, I was asking for my mom's permission to like save my life. And I think what it really spoke to at the time was that my worth was contingent upon my mom's validation. I was very much enmeshed with her belief of my identity and validation of it. And so when she heard how much I was struggling, she got it. She was like, yeah, this is probably not a good place for him. And so August of 2015, I quit my job and I took the red pill. I left corporate America and moved across the country from Iowa to Ohio, and I sold all my stuff. I got rid of everything. Actually, that's not true. I sold my house, and I got rid of most of my things, and I packed up a U-Haul and brought the rest of the stuff home, and I started over. I moved from a 3,000 square foot house, brand new, like beautiful home, to when I started this job, I moved into my friend's house in Ohio, and I lived in his office, an 8x10 room with a blow-up mattress. And it was like the real startup story of like, okay, I'm going to sleep practically on the floor and have a desk, and that's it. And I knew nobody. I knew him. It was extremely confronting because I moved to this city called Dayton, Ohio, where I knew 0 people. And it was like, this place blows. I mean, not to say that Iowa was any better, but it was like, this place sucks. And I started from ground zero. Like, okay, I'm going to go make some friends and find some people. And thank God I found some community through this entrepreneurial development thing called Up Dayton, and met some entrepreneurs that started this nucleus co-share and like met some beautiful community. And I started to see people who loved what they did. And it was super confronting. Like all of my friends were entrepreneurs in things they did and they loved doing it. And I was like, I don't get it. Even in the work that I was doing, I loved what I did, but I didn't love who I did it for. And so it was still very confronting. And yet it was only, life moving me towards what I really wanted to be up to. And so, yeah, it was extremely confronting to walk away from a 6-figure salary and vested preferred stock and, the pathway to leadership and like all this stuff. But I think in a past life, I like to say in a past life, I was a overweight and very sick, rich person. I suffered a lot, but at the sake of money. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be a guy who wakes up and loves what he does and who he's around and what he gets to contribute and give to the world. And I think these decisions that I've made, these choices that I've made to jump off the boat and learn how to live on the island were just more doubling down on those ideas. And, some days are hard because I see a lot of my friends who are, they're set for life in a way. I don't know if they're happy. I don't want to make those judgments. I have no idea how their experience really is. But I know for myself, it's not what I wanted. And yeah, I really acknowledge anybody who's willing to jump off of that boat and to find who they are and what they want out of life and not just take what's given to them. I don't think taking someone else's dream is the valiant thing. And that's no judgment. I think it's more a testament to showing up for life on our terms. I like to say living a life on purpose isn't easy. It's worth it. And as you know, quitting your corporate job and forging your own path, there's a lot of confrontation in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like loneliness that comes with being an entrepreneur, because a lot of people can't relate.
Right.
Which is interesting, because now I think a lot of people can relate. A lot of people are like, I hate my boss. I hate who I work for. I don't have any benefits. This place sucks. A lot of people can resonate with the commiseration of the corporate jobs. But not a lot of people can resonate with the bravery of like, yeah, I took the leap. And I think a lot of people want to. I think we're starting to see that shift in society that, fuck it, I'll sell my $70,000 truck and drive a beater if it means I don't have to show up for work on someone else's demand. And so I don't know if I ever really understood how loving it was to give myself that gift versus to keep going so that I could have a Rolex and a Mercedes. And I was that guy. I did really want those things. And some days I still do. And I think I sit with those parts of me and I'm like, okay, great. I love that you like nice things. And I love that I love what I do and want to work hard to create that type of life so that in the future, if I want a Rolex, I'll buy one. My guess is I'm going to get to that place and be like, you know what? Could have a lot of impact for 50 grand or for that Ferrari, that 500 grand. I'd be like, and maybe I'll still do it. Maybe I'll go rent one. But I think I know now that my worth isn't contingent upon it.
There's so many aspects to the things that we partake in with our jobs. When we explore that, it's all just leads to this experience of being trained, gaining experience, and how the experience compounds on top of each other. And how we can sit here today and look back on these times of different jobs we did, different responsibilities we held and learned, of how it all makes sense. And it really does mold us into the version, it supports the molding of the version who we are today. And leaving your corporate job the way you did, choosing yourself, and taking that leap into the unknown, especially into the startup world, which is extremely unstable and very exciting and very, in many ways, where the magic happens when you get to step into a role of a startup. And leaving your corporate job led you to completely unexpected and brand new experiences. And one of which is, falling into the community of special needs and disabilities. And this one, as you are very well aware, is an experience and a reality that I also have essentially grown up living in regards to my sister. Leaving your corporate job and stepping into this startup that with a mission to support and help the disabled community, what types of experiences and lessons did you gain from being in such one of the most, in my opinion, real and authentic human experiences that not a lot of people can relate to, actually?
I think one of the most important things I learned from working in the disability community was the following. I used to call the disability community the last minority, because all day we'll talk black, white, male, female, gay, straight, rich, poor, but we will never talk walk, roll. That we built a world, an inaccessible world for a vast majority of the population that will never experience. Like, look at Hawaii is the perfect example. There are no wheelchair accessible hikes. There are, like, this is not a wheelchair-friendly backdrop of paradise. And it's really unfortunate. Not to say that we need to go terraform the world to do that, but rather just to see that we don't give a shit about this community as society. Like, we pretend like we do. We use them for marketing campaigns and we use them for virtue signaling. But when it comes down to brass tacks, we don't give a shit about them. And the government funding and the programs and the lack thereof are so drastically obvious that, like, we don't care. And it's so depressing, so heartbreaking. The numbers now of autism or just all that stuff, like, it's so indicative of how normal it is an experience these days for Americans to have a disability. I think the number's like 1 in 5. Some level of disability. And the healthcare system is not built to support it. It's built to profit off of it. But, working with these people who have wheelchairs, these things are like, $10,000 for a manual chair, $30,000 to $40,000 for a power chair, plus the van at $150,000, $100,000 to $150,000. That's not sustainable, And to see these people who, for a lot of companies, just want to make a dime. They just want to make more money off of them. It's really sad. And so I'd say one of the biggest lessons I learned from the disability community was gratitude for a life I didn't even know I had. I tell people, like, there are a list of abbreviations that you have never heard of that you will thank God that you don't have to deal with on a daily basis. There is a whole community of mostly children, because they don't live super long, but they have they can live adult lives, but most of the people I would meet were children. They have a condition called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, AMC. And what it means is that in the mother's womb, the mother doesn't secrete the protein to make you move. And so you end up becoming a fused bag of bones.
Wow.
You actually don't have any ball joints. Your knees, your hips, your elbows, your wrists, your ankles, all fused solid. And so you come out like this. I literally knew a girl whose hands were stuck like this for her entire life.
Wow.
She was left on the doorstep of a Korean orphanage. She ended up becoming a great friend of mine. And the world's not built for her. And not to say that we are supposed to build the world for them, but what we can do as an advanced society is support people, however they walk, roll, traverse through this life. And that was just one. I ended up meeting hundreds of people with things like ALS, spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, or not Down syndrome, muscular dystrophy, spinal muscle atrophy, like, just amazing humans. People who, like, woke up in the reality of the impermanence of life. And I think that's one of the craziest things about the disability community is they remind us of the fragility of life. I had a friend who was on a run one day and he fell through a parking grate and fell 50 feet into a parking garage, instantly powderized his legs.
Wow.
Became paraplegic for the rest of his life. I had another friend who was an actress, hula dancer, used to grow pot on Hawaii. Amazing human. Woke up with transverse myelitis, a bacterial infection that paralyzed her from the waist down. Like that. Amazing human. Still is. Why is that her life? I don't know. One of my friends, she got shot in the back. She ended up becoming Miss Wheelchair America, but she got shot by a stray bullet. Paralyzed. I've had multiple friends like that. Crazy stories. And these are their lives, No different than ours. They are humans who want to feel loved and accepted and laugh, have body image issues just like you and I. And for whatever reason, they navigate the world 2.5 feet lower in a wheelchair. And to have spent the 3 years with the robotic company plus the next 4 years working specifically for that community, serving that community, it just showed me how important service is, how beautiful of an opportunity it is to help alleviate someone else's suffering. And it was one of the best gifts that life ever gave me, was to work with that community. Because most people will never interact with that. Like, most people don't know that community until they become it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you're lucky enough to live long enough to need some mobility aid, we will all enter the disability community, whether it's in diapers or in a wheelchair, in a walker, with glasses. Glasses is the number one disability in the world,
Mm.
you know? So I think there's something really beautiful in that, to help normalize these conversations around, especially with children. Children are so unfiltered. They come up like, what's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you walk? You know, like all that stuff. One of the most beautiful things about what I got to do which was helping people feed themselves, is it's something we all want. It's something we all do naturally. Is we eat food to create energy in our bodies, to make the cells, all that stuff. And there's just something about sharing a meal with someone, looking at them, and being able to sit and talk story and laugh, and that's something we all do, you know. And so to normalize that conversation with people who couldn't go like this, who couldn't bring their food to their mouth, is deeply heartwarming to see how impactful it was when a mom was like, I can be a mom and not a caregiver. I can watch my son feed himself so I don't have to be that. That's incredible. There's those little mundane moments of magic that I think that we're restoring in life, where it's just, can we sit around the fire and talk story and be human still? And I think that's part of this Embracing podcast idea, is like, what would it take for us to embrace all of our experience?
As you once stepped into supporting a friend in the startup entrepreneur space, eventually you feel inspired to do the same for yourself, along in tandem with your healing journey and return to self. And I really would love to hear your experience of this process that led you to breath. The breath of life, the breath of connection. I'd love to hear you unpack how breath is so present for you back then, as you explored it and introduced to it, into where this breath is now fueling who you are today.
I just got this really beautiful hit. I never saw this until this moment, but this is so real. When people ask me about how I learned about breathwork, I use it as one of maybe 3 very profound examples of grace in my life. The first example was winning a guitar at a TED Talk. I got called up on stage and won a guitar, and I call that like a moment of grace. Like, that was God coming through the experience, being like, you're gonna need this guitar, because when you're like drowning in suicidal ideation, this guitar is gonna save your life. The second one was breathwork. When I quit my job with P&G and I moved to Dayton, Ohio, I found Wim Hof on a random YouTube algorithm, and I was just enthralled. Like, I was like, I need to learn more. I bought the 10-week course with my roommate at the time, and we dove in, and I ended up becoming a trainer. Like, that to me was grace. What I never realized was the third example is the call that you made to me. Was this opportunity of God coming through and being like, I'm going to help you. And it's going to be through this guy who's also struggling. And to see that your willingness to reach out to me for help was in my own way a life raft for me to be with myself. And I think the reason I thought of that was when you asked about this breath of life, this connection. And to me, you know, as it started, breathwork was this opportunity to like trip balls. You know, it was like this opportunity to like, whoa, I feel so different. And then I can take an ice bath or a cold shower because I'm a badass. And what I realize now is the intimacy that occurs when you share breath with someone. So I think tattooing is so powerful, because you share this intimate space of breath. Same with sex, you know, like you're sharing breath with someone right in front of you. And so this opportunity to be in someone else's field and share their energy is like such a profound experience. And it was the access to a whole new level of my healing. I think I could say at any moment in the past 10 years is when my healing journey started, whether it's moving to Maui and hiring 3 therapists or finding breath work or whatever. Like, there's so many examples of like the next level or the level up. And breathwork was definitely one of them, because it was the first time in my life when the voice in my head turned off. I would do this breath work and I would And I would get to this point where the roommate in my head stopped completely. And I remember being like, you in there? What the heck? You know, because that roommate tormented me for decades. And so when I found that, I became instantly addicted. It was my new drug. And I'm sure I used it in that dissociative way of like, I'm going to breathe my balls off until I dissociate from my own suffering and then I'm fine again. And for a while, you know, not during it, but later in my self-awakening, I'm sure I berated myself for it of like, oh, you're disassociating with that. And it was like, bro, that's what you needed. Instead of smoking weed, you were breathing. Great. That's amazing. You know, instead of watching porn, you were breathing. Great. That's amazing. And so I think over the years, breathwork became this way for me to help people guide themselves back to themselves, to create a inviting somatic experience so someone who had a lot of trauma could find a way back into their body comfortably. And I think so many of us in society are really struggling with that right now. It feels uncomfortable to be in our bodies. And so we're like, what do I do with this? And it's like, find a way in. You know, so many people are like, I don't know how to cry. I'm like, you can't know a cry. You can only feel one. You know, you can't know a feeling. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that because these feelings are so big, you know. And a lot of us had parents who didn't co-regulate with us. When we had our big feelings, they were like, go in your room. It's like, that's torture, you know, versus like, come here. Let me hold you in that. I'll be with you. And I think that's the next level is finding safe humans that are like, I'm willing to sit with you in that big feeling and not solve it for you, but just be there as a guiding and grounding presence to help you know that it's okay to feel that way. And I've seen it with you, for me, and me for you, with you, you know, like all that, like to find someone else who we feel is safe enough to embrace these uncomfortables, you know, whether it's money, family, so many different reasons, relationships, substance abuse, just being like, I don't want to be here right now. Like, okay, I'll be with you in that. I'll be with you and you're not wanting to be here. I'll be with you and I don't like this. Because sometimes our parents aren't going to be those people to do that for us, with us. And that for me was breath. Breath was something I was always scared of. I grew up with horrible asthma. And so my breath always scared the shit out of me because the thought of losing my breath meant I felt like I was going to die. And years later, having cured my asthma, like, I'm not afraid of my breath anymore. In fact, when I go into my breathwork practice, I can take myself to crazy levels of consciousness, and not from an escapism thing, but from like an exploration. And so that's something I want to share with the world, to show people that they don't have to be victims of their circumstance, and that breath is actually the access point to the nervous system. And for that, it is the Ambien, it is the Valium, it is the Prozac, it is the Viagra, it is the caffeine. It is all of those things. And not most people. My fear is that some people will call me crazy. My excitement is that most people won't.
I'd love for you to kind of share this experience of now fully stepping into the world of service under the umbrella of entrepreneurship, but in a come from of wanting to be of help. And through the modality of breath, and ultimately creating the safety of feeling it all. What has that been like for you? Stepping into that space, holder, creator, and offerer of someone who can guide them back to their body and living this path of purpose.
As you asked that question, it was interesting. September was my beginning of my 7th year as an entrepreneur. And embarrassingly, I would admit that the first 5 years, I was mostly serving myself. I was coming to the table in a way that was like, I want to help you because if I help you, I can help myself. or rather, maybe more honestly, I want to help myself, and the way I'm going to do that is by helping you. And it took me a long time to admit that that was my come from. That my come from was scarcity, that my come from was fear, that my come from was not being okay. And over the past maybe year, have really come to see the opportunity, because I have now served myself, that I'm available to serve others, that others are not the opportunity to serve me in my service to them. Is now that I feel whole and complete, that I can actually be of service to people. And so it's been a very interesting, and it really took me coming to Maui, I think, because in coming here, I crumbled. In your invitation to fall apart, it gave me space to fall apart too, in my own way, and then ask for help. And, since I've been on Maui, I've been working with 3 different therapists. And some people are like, why do you need 3 therapists? And I'm like, oh, you don't get it. I went in on every level, psychologically, somatically, physically, to reprogram my entire way of being. And for that, and have become a completely different version of myself. And in that, feeling a different level of safety in my body means that if someone's like, I don't want to work with you, like, great, thanks for letting me know. Or like someone's like, I want to work with you, and then they ghost me. I'm like, great, thanks for letting me know, And I think that's been something that's really been a different level of ease in my life, is I only work with people who want to work with me. And if you don't want to work with me, great. That's the end of the story. Mm-hmm. Not, oh, you're not ready, or you're not willing, or no, you just don't want to work with me. Great. Because those who do, and they're ready, they get incredible results for themselves. Mm-hmm. I am the space, I'm the container, the guide, whatever you want to call it, but they're the ones doing the work. And so the reality of, I feel like I'm actually now in service to others, because I have served and continually serve myself. I think one of the biggest things was asking for help, is allowing myself to believe that I'm worthy of help, and it doesn't make me weak for asking for it. Mm-hmm. That was something I just didn't understand. I think as men, we're told, like, you got to do it by yourself. You got to figure it out. And you're a fucking pussy if you can't. Like, who wrote that book? Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. And I look back. I saw this today, actually. We were driving in the car on the way to Story. And I was looking at my phone, and I got a Facebook memory from 3 years ago. And I was reading When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. It was 3 years ago. And I was like, man, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, I've been reading and researching this stuff for probably a decade now. And really started taking it serious maybe like 5 years ago. And just seeing that this is real. And to shift my come from consciously from one of, I want to land clients and I want to make money, to I want to serve people. I want to help. That has been a recent thing. And I think it was pivotal for that to occur before the money popped off. Because if the money popped off beforehand, I would end up still being that diseased, lonely, overworked guy. Mm-hmm. Versus someone who truly loves what he gets to do for this world. I really believe that is what's shifting, is I'm stepping into a version of myself in my life where money isn't even going to be a conversation anymore. Or it'll only be a conversation, because it will be infinite in my needs and wants and dreams and desires. And for that, it's a whole new uncharted territory. And I'm very excited to be on Maui and with you and exploring different ways to bring these to different people, because it's so needed right now. If I've learned one thing over the past 4 years, it's slow down and take a breath. And that's, I think, what we did over the past year, is we stopped. We didn't slow down. We stopped. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, we slowed down, stopped, and now we're starting to speed back up. Mm-hmm. And it took this, like, put your head in the mouth of the lion and say, eat me. Mm-hmm. And the bravery that it takes to be like, I will let this entire facade of a conversation that is who I believe myself to be, known as my ego, die. Because that's all it is. Mm-hmm. is a conversation of words that we say we are. Because who you believe you are for yourself is different than who I believe you are for yourself, or who you are for me or for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's just that, then it can change. And when you see it as just that, it's like actually really easy to change. And so I feel like what people are really wanting now is like, this isn't who I want to be anymore. Like, okay, great. Who do you want to be? Let's go after that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I really choose the empowering narrative of while a lot of people will say the world is crumbling, I would like to believe that it's waking up.
Mm-hmm.
That and we've had a lot of these conversations of like something really beautiful is coming. A lot of people might have to die for that to happen.
A lot of suffering for sure.
Yeah, a lot of weight has to be shed.
It's a perfect transition time of essentially the pivotal crossroads that we both had experienced a little over a year ago, which ultimately led us to having this present moment where we're sitting across from each other in Maui. And that pivotal experience of, for me, my mom passing away, and for you, Chester passing away, which ultimately led to me making that phone call and leaving that voicemail, and you calling me back, and everything else just unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you'd like to share from your experience of losing Chester and stepping into the portal, the powerful portal of grief? And for you, which would be my follow-up question, how that led you to Maui and the ultimate confrontation.
I think the first thing I would say is I hope everybody lives a life big enough to be confronted by the overwhelming wave that is grief. To be so lucky to love something so dearly that it completely crushes you when it leaves. Because that, for me, was Chester. When Chester passed a little over a year ago, I was pummeled by the tsunami of this idea of loss that almost ended me. Like it brought me to my knees 3 feet under. Like I was devastated. And yet at the same time so deeply held. Like to see hundreds, if not thousands of people reach out to me of like, this is incredible what you had. You are so lucky. I'm just so grateful for Facebook memories. Some days I don't like them, but today was one of those great ones. I did a Q&A last year, apparently October 4th, that was like, what are 3 things you would ask of Chester? And I said I wouldn't ask him of anything. I would say 3 things. I would say, I'm sorry I traveled so much while you were here. I would say, you're the best boy. And the third one that really got me in that video was, I miss you. And I think what grief has taught me is to not let life go by. To become an active participant in presence with the experience in front of me. Because it is an abundant amount of love. And everything that happens, as unfavorable as it might occur for my ego, everything is for me. And Chester passing was that reminder of how lucky was I to take a year off to spend 6 months uninterrupted traveling across the country with him, to come home and only a month later usher him to the door of death. In my living room, holding his hand. How lucky am I that he didn't die while I was out to dinner, get hit by a car, any of those things. Like, I got to do that. I am so incredibly lucky. And how painful. It's an initiation that can only be spoke of upon experiencing it. And I get that now. Like, I never got a lot of those things. I mean, the only other one I could imagine is, like, you can't imagine being a parent till you're a parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. You can't. Grief was the other one. It was like, yeah, you cannot imagine what this is like until you go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Chester was the greatest gift I've ever received, because it was such a pure reminder of love. And I hope that everybody gets something like that in their life, whether that's a child or a pet or passion, music, art, whatever. I hope every human can experience that, because it is so profoundly loving. I was in equine therapy on Friday, and the woman asked me, so what did Chester passing give you? And I looked up over Ulu Palakua and was like, this.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me Maui. He gave me the Hawaiian Islands. Because I truly believe that Chester knew what was happening. I don't know how this fucking furry thing was like, look, bro, I'm about to dip. And when I dip, you are going to live in paradise as paradise.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to hurt for a little bit. And I truly believe that he knew that he knew I wouldn't say yes if he was still here. I knew that I wouldn't say yes if he was still here.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether you want to call it your mom, I don't know. It's like, okay, it's time. And yeah, it's the rest is history. And I really believe that what we're getting to do as a product of feeling all this is just clearing out a lot of space, so that the space that we hold is so pure,
Mm-hmm.
is so clean, so that other people can feel their feelings so clearly, because we're not injecting our experience into that. And that took a lot of willingness from us
Mm-hmm.
to not run away. And some days we did. Some days we smoked a copious amount of weed,
Mm-hmm.
or drank a lot of Pog seltzers. So what?
Mm-hmm.
So be it. If that's the worst thing we did, you didn't hit your son. I didn't hit my partner. We didn't do coke or heroin. And none of those are wrong either. They're just what they are. I wouldn't suggest them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't endorse them. But this is what we ended up doing. Kudos. And for that, I think where we're headed is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
For that matter, I think where we're at is really beautiful.
Which is perfect for my next question. Because it became very clear, even before you arrived, that we were on to something very powerful. And all while experiencing a lot of resistance and fear, because grief is very intimidating. But we both knew that grief was presented to us at a very specific time in our lives. And we both knew, through our communication and finally sharing space, that what was going to come from losing two really special people in our lives was brotherhood. We both knew that there had to be a process that curated the sense of safety, the sense of vulnerability and transparency, so we both could really lean into the crumbling and ultimately the healing through the connection of brotherhood, while supporting each other in our grief and holding space to clear space for the versions of us that were very clearly being asked to come out. What was your experience like in the sense of the desire of brotherhood, the creation of it over the last year during our, what I like to call, our sacred pause and how that's tied into the other branches and variations of your own healing, of being able to hold space for each other.
The visual I get when you ask that question was in the natives. That my guess, and I don't know this to be true, but my guess is that during the times of the natives, when a brother fell in war, that it wasn't the women holding space for him, for the other men to grieve. It was other men holding the container for the man who lost his brother to go absolutely berserk, ballistic, ape shit, sad, crazy over that loss. And I think that really speaks to what I wanted in that crumbling was not a woman to hold me and coddle me. I wanted a man to hold the door while I beat this shit out of something. In the anger and the frustration of how hard life is. And I truly believe one of the things I learned over the past year was the only women I want holding space for my emotions are my therapist and sometimes my partner. Other than that, I want it to be a man because I feel permissed to go to whatever length, whatever end of expression I feel in my body, and I'm safe in doing so when another embodied man is holding that space. I don't think I even knew I needed that. I think I just knew that I always had a brother in my life and I never felt close to him.
Mm-hmm.
The brother I grew up with beat the shit out of me, so I was always afraid of him. To the point where when I came here to live with you, there was a lot of fear that had to be reconciled. There was a lot of fear of like, well, can I really say this? Is he going to be pissed? Is Leo mad at me? How many times have we had that conversation? And the reality that took me a while to let in was, bro, I'll tell you if I'm mad. Wait, you mean I don't have to guess? You mean I don't have to like pretend and like figure it out and like make shit up and have you test me wrong? Oh, that's weird. Okay. I guess I'll believe that. And it just reminds me of this statistic that I saw during COVID that 1 in 4 men have 0 close friends. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think the statistic was before COVID, 1 in 5 men didn't have any close friends, and now it's a 1 in 4. And it just shows how much men are struggling. We've spent so much time talking about how shitty it is to be a woman. And I'm not saying it's great to be a woman. It sucks for a lot of women, and that needs to change. And I think it blows to be a man in a lot of ways as well. That we don't talk about as society because we're too busy making men wrong for all the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And rightfully so. A lot of men have caused a lot of these problems.
Mm-hmm.
The perpetration of sexual abuse and war and a lot of those things are driven by men. And that's fuck you guys for making us look bad.
Yep.
And damn, for the conscious men and the men who want to heal and the men who don't want to be continuing the propagation of the genetic lineage and trauma that they were gifted when they were born. Whew. Mm-hmm. It's a hard, long, and lonely road.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of men are tired of walking it alone. I had this conversation with my dad yesterday. I was like, look, man, I know you don't like sitting still, and I know there are reasons for it. It's probably a big feeling like worthlessness or failure or laziness or whatever, and I'm not here to help you find it anymore. If you want to go to therapy, that's great. And I also don't believe you will because I've been the only one going to therapy for years now. No shade. No judgment. I love you. You're my father, and you will always be my father. And you aren't my guide anymore. You know, like you're a guy. You are not my guide. And I can have those conversations with him now without the fear of shame or judgment or rejection. Just being like, look, fam, we're on different paths.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe there are a lot of men who want to be on that path regardless if their father is or isn't. Because many of those men have sons who want to be on, who they don't want to have to be on that path because they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the call that a lot of men and women are calling humanity to right now is, can we just do better than we got?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of that is brotherhood. I think men with support lead a very beautiful world. I just don't think most men have support. And most women don't, for that matter, either. And I think that's something that both myself, you, the people and the women around us are very committed to. And so I have very high faith that what we're calling in is a very beautiful existence of belonging, of brotherhood, of sisterhood, of community, of support, belly laughter, nourishing foods,
Deep cries.
not alone cries.
The witnessing.
The witnessing, that's a whole podcast in itself, is witnessing and understanding how powerful it is to go through an experience with someone present. Is just because it's not just the witnessing of the falling apart, it's the witnessing of, like, we kissed, like, bro, how was it? Tell me more. And not tell me more of, like, about her. It's like, tell me about you, like, tell me about what went inside your body, and, like, how that's been, and the build up, and, like, what do you think is next? Like, it's so incredible to see people in their joy and their excitement. And so, yeah, I think witnessing is one of the greatest gifts we can give another human.
Presence.
Yeah.
The gentle presence of the witness. Not talked about enough. Not experienced. Nowhere near experienced enough.
Right.
Yeah, total topic for another podcast, but yes. So my final kind of inquiry is, because the reality is we don't always have it together. We don't always have the answers. And we don't always know which direction to go. And when that unfolds, this inner conflict of pausing or waiting or resting, all while our thoughts and our narratives and our ego spirals out, sense of no control. What's your experience like when on this journey the path disappears for a moment in time, or the path just isn't clear? What's your experience when things get dark like that and you're forced to really go within and find that trust and find that faith to compassionately be patient with the process, and then knowing when to take action?
This reminds me of this idea that it's easy to love your life when it's going well. Like, it's easy to trust God when the path is clear. It's much harder to trust when it's unclear, when there's uncertainty, when there's faith, doubt, shame spiraling. But I think that is where it's born, right? Doubt is necessary for faith to arise. I think that's the whole point of faith, is the trust when doubt is there. And I think that was one of the most confronting things I ever experienced when I was working with one of my coaches, Peter Crone, was that he's like, the two levels are trust and patience. And it was like always what I believed, or always what I talked about but never lived. And that, I think, has been the integration over the past couple of years since working with him, was like, I trust in the good things coming, and I'm patient enough to wait for them. And that's been so challenging for me, to trust in God again. Because when I called off my wedding 10 years ago, I was like, fuck you, dude. This is your fault. And God was just like, he actually believes I did that. That's cute. Like, kind of, come on, buddy. Take responsibility for your life now. And in taking responsibility and learning how to be accountable for myself and to live in integrity, there is only trust. And that was a really, really tough lesson. And I think that was one of the best lessons that Chester ever gave me. I said, when Chester died, I became a man. Because it is not a boy thing to hold your best friend while he dies. That's a man thing. And I grew the fuck up in that moment. I transformed. And in that, became radically committed to living in integrity. And and you helped me see this on multiple different occasions of, like, do you actually trust God, Or does that just sound cool? And I was like, thanks, Kuya. and the reality was I didn't. You know, as much as I wanted to tout and talk about it, I didn't. I was still salty. I was still pissed, righteous indignance. Like, you don't understand my pain. I was like, well, that's a great way to not have to feel it. And in feeling my pain, I got to set it down. And there are still certain things, albeit them very sparse, that I feel like I still carry. But for the most part, I've felt and sat down and integrated of like, oh, wow, this life is really beautiful. And I was talking to that guy today at Story, Yasaway? I think it was something like that. Yahasaway. And, you know, I was like, yeah, I feel called to do Iboga. And he was like, whew, Iboga's hell, bro. I was like, that's why I want to do it. To remember that when I come back from hell, that this is heaven. And I think that's been why I do hard things, whether it's an ice bath or plant medicine, is to remember that this is heaven on earth. This is the kingdom of God. And it's the ego that's like, well, if I would have gotten this, though, meh. And it's like, no, this is it. This is beauty, love, in all of its magnificence. And the only thing that's playing a fair weather game is my ego. And when I can surrender that and come back to this, it's like, this is incredible in every way. Like, we get to do this. This is nuts. You know, I think most people may never get that. And I'm here for the other part. I'm here for the people who will, like, not the most, the few that want it, you know. And I think that's something that we've both come to commit to is in the face of rejection, in the face of the norm and the matrix and all that stuff, is like, I want to be here for the truth, you know. And it's a really beautiful journey. The fact that we get to do it on Maui, the most beautiful place on the planet, probably one of, if not the. How did we get so lucky? Like, what did we do?
We did something right.
Yeah. And I think part of it was we said yes. You know, whether it was, I think it was well before when you quit your job. I think it was probably, in my observation, is when you went to live in a van on the mainland. Like, you stared fear in the fucking face, bro.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was probably quitting corporate America. In your case, closer to 20 years ago, being like, I'm going to live for me. I'm not going to live for the narrative. And for that, it's like, okay, get ready.
Yeah.
You're going to get everything you ever dreamed of and everything that it takes to get that dream. Okay.
And it's like, be very clear.
Very clear.
We're not fucking around.
No.
Ask the right questions.
Right. Which is really hard to do, one, in survival. Two, when you're moving a million miles an hour. Or three, when you're really fucked up. Like, which I think is most humans. Well, I got that $70,000 truck. I got to make that car payment. It's $1,000 a month now. Or, well, I just got to get to the next thing because the kids have got to go to soccer practice and, like, we got that dinner party to go to and da-da-da-da. Or, you want to smoke a blunt? You know, you want to smoke a joint? You know, like, no shade. Those paths are real for many. And I almost went down all three of them. Very close. I mean, I've been down all three of them, actually. Not with the kids part, but I've most definitely been on all three of those paths. And I got off. I bought a $100,000 car once, and I refused delivery on it because I was like, bro, that's a horrible decision. Pissed off one of my friends pretty dearly. Forgave me for it, but he was pretty pissed. But I bought a $100,000 BMW. It's like, dude, you're fucking up, bro. Oh, God.
Thank you so much for taking this time to unpack and share this magical journey that I've also been able to witness, observe, to learn from, to share. And thank you for showing up.
Thank you for asking and holding the space. And I look forward to doing the same for you, because there are quite a few stories that I get to listen to and experience through you sharing them again. So stay tuned.
Real quick, I'm going to read a poem that I wrote.
Mm.
I want to record just to have for whether it's used or not. But it's been formulating for at least a week now. And finally, a couple of days ago, I decided just to put the words somewhere. And it doesn't feel complete yet, but it feels necessary to share so I can only continue to empower myself to continue to share. For now, this is called Fuck Yes. Sit with it. Feel it all. Are you able to allow yourself to be with yourself? The discomfort, the tension, the heaviness, the void, the muck. Fuck. Why? The place where the magic happens. The space where all your healing hides. Layers upon layers of the weight, carrying it all, bearing down on our hearts. Easier to avoid, easier to ignore, easier to cope, until it is not. Afraid to spiral out, afraid to crumble, afraid to lose control. Fuck. Why? Unbearable, unwearable, unavoidable. Now what? Stuck. Exhausted. Depressed. Defeated. Spiraling down. Fuck. Why? Why? I'm over it. Something has to change. Leaning in. Trusting the process. Finally ready. Finally listening. Finally present. The time seems to be now. Ready to feel, ready to heal. No more running, no more blending in, no more hiding. Fuck. Authenticity, vulnerability, honest expressions, building the foundation to live a life fully lived, fully expressed, fully felt. A life worth living, a life worth sharing. Embracing the human experience. All of it. Power, resilience, magic, love. Yes. Love. Yes. Loving in the fullness of the human experience. The highs and lows, the ins and outs, the flow, the pause, ups and downs, the allowance, the gentleness, the yumminess. To touch and be touched, to feel and be felt, to witness and be witnessed, fully, with depth, with passion, intimately. Fuck yes.
Fuck yes.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the interview today. And if you haven't already done so, please like or follow us on whatever platform you're listening to, and let us know if you have any questions or comments or requests of future interviewees.
And we hope you find this inspiration, the clarity, and the direction to fully lean into being human, whatever that means for you. Aloha.